Thanks, Emily, and good afternoon, everybody. Seeing some familiar faces and some new ones, so this is exciting. Again, thanks for the opportunity to present. This is kind of my comfort zone. I enjoy communicating with conservationists and folks that are passionate about invasive plant management. That's been my background for a couple of decades now. Maybe a little bit of background about myself without taking up too much of the time, but my name's James Leary. I'm assistant professor at the University of Florida. I'm stationed in Gainesville at the Center for Aquatic and Invasive Plants. I've been here since 2019. So it's still brand new to me. Florida is a really exciting place, being in a subtropical environment with a really dynamic ecosystem that is favorable to invasive species, of course. Prior to that, my appointment was at the University of Hawaii, another subtropical destination, another fabulous location that invasive species love as well. So there's a real connection between Hawaii and Florida, except that most of it is actually not. So it's like you think you know everything, and then you come here and you learn something new and you realize you're back to ground zero. So I'm constantly learning. In fact, I'm learning more than I'm teaching. And I think that's kind of what I'd like to deliver in today's presentation is what am I learning about Florida, and how do I get that information to learn about what the situation is? And so pardon me if many of you who have maybe born and raised here or have been doing this a long time, you're very informed. And so I'm playing catch up. But in some cases, maybe I'm identifying resources that you are unaware of. And so I say that very naively. And so I'd like to share with you technologies that are becoming available. You know, the internet's a wonderful thing. Some people, admonish it, but I embrace it. I embrace technology, and I particularly embrace information technology. Technology designed to provide information, historical, archival, and current. All of it is very relevant, especially in the arena I'm in, which is aquatic plant management. I guess I should share screen too before I get too all monologue here. Let's go to here. So we're going to talk about information technologies enhancing aquatic plant management. I know this is a group that deals with invasive plant management, and that would probably pertain mostly to terrestrial and or aquatic. I see CJ is online, so he knows. What I'm sharing with you is just in context of aquatic plant management, but it certainly translates to all areas of conservation. And so I'd like to also thank contributors to this presentation, Kelly Gladding and Jonathan Gluckert with University of Florida, part of the team, and Alex Dew, who's with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. He's a technophile, very sophisticated with data management, and has inspired me in a lot of areas on how to embrace technology towards conservation and natural area management. So moving forward, what are some of the learning outcomes we're going to get out of this today? I want to be able to teach you all, or to share with you all, on how to be informed on information technologies designed for planning and evaluating aquatic plant management activities and or invasive plant management activities. And this is information that's available over space and time. Data assets that I will inform you of pertain to the weather, hydrology, water quality, chemical analyses, GPS, point intercept data, acoustics, satellite, and airborne. So what you're seeing from these data sets is some of them are part of the public domain. They're readily available and accessible to all parties, and some of them are internally derived, collected within my team, and then made available that way, and or through other ways. And then with this data, we can explore different types of analysis and interpretation through remote sensing, GIS, and change detection. What happens before and after events related to invasive plant management, for instance. So what you should be picking up on is I'm not technically or classically trained in areas of remote sensing or GIS. My discipline is in weed science and invasive plant management, but that inherently means that I need to be up to speed with these technologies because they're extremely powerful and very useful for research and management. So in some ways, it's blind leading the blind. It would not be hard to find someone probably in this audience who knows more than I do about this subject. So I'm teaching you what I've learned about it, and you may already know this, or it's a new experience for you as well. So I come in naive, and I come in humbly to share with you my experiences. So there's a lot of challenges to using herbicides in aquatic plant management. I guess I should have set this up with aquatic plant management uses a lot of herbicides. They use a lot of techniques, including biological control, cultural practices, mechanical control. The herbicides really dominate the portfolio, and for good reason. They're highly effective, they're economical, and frankly, they present a smaller environmental footprint. Herbicides that are put into water or on the landscape readily break down within hours and days and are undetectable within that time period. And so when they do the job that they're intended to do, they're extremely powerful and environmentally sound. That does not excuse the fact that the general public, many within the general public, have concerns about how pesticides are used. And so we are constantly scrutinized for that. And so we need to acknowledge, empathize, and appreciate that people are concerned, and we need to address those concerns through transparency and through diligence, being smart about how we use these pesticides so that we're using the least amount to effectively accomplish the conservation goals and landscape protection that we're trying to administer. So aquatic systems are, sorry, I got a little soapboxy there. Aquatic systems are dynamic. For me, the experience has been plants move like animals. I'm used to plants being rooted in the ground and they don't move. You can walk up to it, you can treat it, and then walk away. That doesn't happen in aquatic systems, particularly with the floating plants. And so this is an interesting phenomena that really changes the game on thinking strategically and logistically. Lake systems in Florida are an economic engine. There's a lot of activities that occur on the lakes, and they have a multitude of ecosystem services. Fresh water, it's an abundance of fresh water. They serve as habitat for a number of endangered or unique species to Florida. And otherwise, they are also important for human recreation. There's over 3 million acres of public waters that have public access. And so when you're trying to conduct aquatic plant management activities, you're doing this generally with an audience, and an audience that is prone to scrutinize what you're doing. And again, so these present challenges to our ability to do our job well and responsibly. Sorry, I'm a little bit out of order here. So let me just move into, with that in mind, and I kind of already said it, we need to be diligent about how we plan our aquatic plant management activities, and we need to be diligent about how we evaluate these aquatic plant management activities. How well did they work? Was it worth the cost and investment and did we accomplish our goals? And so this demands that our efforts go way beyond just putting herbicides in the water and walking away. There's an immense amount of effort to plan it, where, how much, and when. And then after that, again, how well did it work? And would I do this again as a next treatment somewhere else? And so generating institutional knowledge about performance factors, time of year, temperature, wind, etc. What type of species we're trying to control, how much we use, where did this herbicide dissipate to? I'm getting technical now, but these are really important factors for being effective in the field. So let's start with weather. This is probably something that most people gravitate to. Almost everyone's conversation starts with, how's the weather? So we're very in tune with climate, with the weather, we understand that climate is changing. There's the reason why we have a lot of people living in Florida is because of the weather. And so it's really important to understand weather patterns, particularly with aquatic plant management or invasive plant management activities. We work in remote areas. It is a huge risk to go out into an area if you know that there is inclement weather or risky or hazardous conditions coming our way, particularly hurricanes. Weather conditions can affect growth and response of invasive plants. We know this. There is really seasonality in spite of the fact that we generally have warm weather year round. Rainfall is really important as well. So we should be in tune with a resource that informs us of weather. And so there is a growing number of excellent websites that give us real-time weather information, animated radar. And so, for instance, windy.com, which I don't have on here, is really interesting and very thoughtful technical website on weather. Sorry, we have a chat. Let me just make sure that there's no problems. One moment. Okay, just questions and comments. Yep, very good. Another really good weather network, I'm going to plug for our University of Florida IFAS weather network, the Florida Automated Weather Network Station, which you see there are, oh, sorry, let me get this out of the way. We have 42 stations across the state. These are supported and subsidized by federal funding and state funding. It's a very advanced network. It gives real-time information with all the parameters you would think of: wind speed, wind direction, temperature, temperature at the surface, temperature 10 feet off the ground, soil moisture is another factor. So these are all really valuable, and you can see that the network is so dense that there is an opportunity for more sophisticated types of calculations, what are called interpolation. So for instance, if you're in an area where you don't have a weather station, there's at least 3 or 4 stations that are surrounding you that you can use that information and average what you think the climate is or the weather is in the area that you're accessing. The other value of the FAWN website is that you can also get archived weather data going back, oh gosh, I'm going to get it wrong, but it goes back over a decade. And so that's really important too. So we usually want to know what the weather is right now, but there is real value in knowing what was the weather 2 months ago when we treated plant X with treatment Y. Weather drives performance of most of our plant management activities, and so being able to have access to this information can cue us into time of year and weather conditions and how it relates to performance that we're seeing 30, 40, 50 days after treatment, for instance. So again, there are several different websites. It's hard to go wrong, but Florida has an excellent network worth visiting. Here's an example of how weather tells us about performance of a herbicide treatment. This is Fish Lake, which is a 200-acre lake in Osceola County. You can see the treatment outline here. It's 50 acres on a 200-acre lake. It's this southeast littoral section. And then you can see that we have 6 hours, 24 hours, and 48 hours. Arrows are indicating wind direction post-treatment, and where we have winds out of the south, southeast, and over the next 2 days post-treatment. And you can see that based on those wind patterns, how the herbicide migrates out of the treatment and then across the lake over that time period. The raster, the heat map, is indicative of herbicide concentration. And so that is really important for us in aquatics to understand concentration and exposure time within the treatment area. You put herbicide in the water, it doesn't stay right there. It's moving, it's constantly moving. And wind and fetch can influence where the herbicide is going to end up. Fortunately, it was an effective treatment, but you can see how herbicide has moved out. Move this out of the way. I think move away too. Can affect performance, and if you have strong winds and they are moving opposite of where your treatment is, this would be a bad idea to administer the treatment. Aquatic treatments can be expensive, and so you need to make it count. So in this case, this was reasonable, but it was a judgment call. And again, wind is really important for gauging or being able to interpret herbicide dissipation in a water column. As one example, by the way. Lake conditions are really important too. Florida is a leader in water quality. That's the first thing I really learned here. I was very impressed with the sophistication and the technology that goes into monitoring water quality. And inherently, water quality related to nutrients is a major driver of aquatic plant performance, particularly our invasive species. And so understanding water quality and how it relates is really important. I think it's undervalued, but again, really important. Lots of phosphorus and lots of nitrogen tend to make things grow much faster than something lake that does not. So again, getting into trophic state, oligotrophic, eutrophic, and hypereutrophic, for example. There are some really fantastic websites. Our water management districts maintain networks such as the South Florida Water Management District. You can see all these points are stations where data is being collected and freely available to the public. The public pays for it and the public benefits from access to it. This is incredible, the amount of information that goes into water quality and hydrology and everything else. I'm also really impressed with the wateratlas.org. I believe it's managed out of the University of South Florida, and counties participate in this program, and their dashboards for the lakes that they are monitoring. I believe they're monitoring monthly. And I want to say this operates through the Florida Department of Environmental Protection as part of the Clean Water Act. So it's very extensive, and the dashboard that they're maintaining with phosphorus and nitrogen and trophic state and chlorophyll, chlorophyll related to harmful algal blooms or algae and lake elevation. This is a fantastic website. And then of course, a shout out to the Lake Watch program. They're the originators of citizen science it's a really interesting program. They're picking up all the lakes that are hard to get to from a public agency standpoint. And so reaching out and getting citizens involved as part of the solution. So water quality in Florida, there is an overwhelming amount of really high quality information. And again, as it relates to aquatic plant management, I would argue for invasive plant management, really keen to know how fertility drives systems and the productivity of those systems. Here's a good example. So these are graphs from Lake Toho-Pecaliga, Lake Toho, and you can see we have a graph over here with total phosphorus in parts per billion on the y-axis and dates, decadal dates on the x-axis. Similarly, we have chlorophyll A in parts per billion as well. And then we have hydrilla cover in black. So we have orange for phosphorus and then hydrilla in black. And so starting in the 1980s, the phosphorus levels in Lake Toho were hypereutrophic. So they were literally, to my understanding, they were putting treated sewage in the lake, and it was contributing to significantly high phosphorus levels that clearly also drove high chlorophyll or high algal populations. And so Lake Toho in the 70s and the 80s was a green lake that had very little submerged aquatic vegetation. Once the Clean Water Act came into place, there were mandates and programs put into place to stop inputs into the lake, non-point source pollutants in the name of it, such as phosphorus. And you can see how quickly the phosphorus level started to decline from the 80s to the 90s. And sure enough, similarly, we're seeing algae starting to decline. Hydrilla was introduced in the late 1950s. So it had been around for 20 years. It was never a problem on Toho until early 1990. You can see how it exploded. I'm speculating, but there's really good science that talks about the stable states and the alternate stable states. And in lake systems, the alternate stable states are algal dominant, macrophyte dominant, or aquatic plant dominance. And I think what we're seeing here is, as we're cleaning the water up, this created an environment that was very favorable to hydrilla. So hydrilla was there, we just didn't see it, and then it just exploded. And it dramatically improved the water quality, by the way, as well. So Toho is now mesotrophic and approaching oligotrophic. It's really impressive. Hydrilla is a huge problem in Lake Toho today, and it's been that way for 30 years. So these are some, with that in mind, if we understand nutrient status, we can predict and forecast situations such as a hydrilla explosion. By the way, you may be aware of the latest hydrilla explosion on Lake Apopka. Lake Apopka is historically, for the last 70 years, has been a green lake with no SAV. Just in the last decade, hydrilla has come on, and just in the last 2 years, it went from 500 acres reported to over 10,000 acres reported. So really incredible explosion. I mean, when we talk about invasive species, this plant is bad to the bone. It's a big problem. It's a multi-million-dollar problem. And there's also contention, of course, and I don't want to get into that, but clearly, you know, the difference between an algal dominant lake and a macrophyte dominant lake, there's a desire to have SAV. It's just like, oh, does it have to be hydrilla? Well, in this case, it is. And so now we're in this situation of, do you manage or do you not manage, or how do you manage? But we also know that, similar to Toho, phosphorus levels in Apopka have been declining for 30 years because of the good efforts by Lake County and St. John's Water Management District, St. John's River Water Management District, in their efforts to reduce nutrient loads, paying off in the form of hydrilla. Monitoring water levels are really important as well. Less so, of course, for terrestrial environments, but when we're talking about in-water treatments, again, the name of the game is concentration and exposure time. And so if you're trying to achieve 200 parts per billion and you know you have X number of acre feet or you know your volume, and your average depth is, just say, 5 feet, well, you need to add so much herbicide to achieve that target concentration. Now, if it rains for a month and your water levels increase a foot and you add the same prescription, you have just, you are not going to achieve target concentration. You have to add more herbicide to match the new volume that's established. Vice versa, when water levels are low and you add the same amount of herbicide, you could exceed the target concentration you're trying to achieve, and then you could have a negative consequence for that, starting with the expense. You don't need that much herbicide to achieve target concentration. So we need to be very good at calculating volumes, which means we need to have good bathymetry on the lake, and we need to have good information on elevation. And so this is where the water management districts excel. This is almost available hourly in real time. We know what's going on. A lot of these public waters are regulated for elevation. They're designed for conveyance and flood control, so we need to keep them down during the monsoon summer and keep them up during the dry winters. And so we are, the engineering that goes into this is really phenomenal. Of course, it comes with its controversies, in terms of disruptions of natural systems, but really important. You can't have 20 million people permanently living in Florida and another 130 million visiting without managing water in Florida. It just doesn't work that way. So regardless, this information is extremely valuable for coordinating aquatic plant management activities where volume is an important value to know prior to going out to administer a treatment. And here's a case in point. We have herbicide cost, and then we have acres. Oh, this is for one of my pond management lectures, but just to give you an idea, if, for instance, if we were treating a 10-acre pond and water levels increase a foot, that adds another $1,200 in herbicide cost on top of what you had budgeted for down here at less than $200. So this is really important to know. And basically the take-home message is if you can schedule it right, you want to schedule when water levels are low. That's when you use the least amount of herbicide. You're going to save on the budgeting. And you're also going to make friends with people who are concerned about the over dependence on using herbicides in a lake system. It doesn't always work out that way, but this is one factor that we can incorporate into our decision-making process. Analytical chemistry is really important as well in using herbicides in aquatic systems. We need to know how much herbicide is in the water. We need to know where herbicide is in the water and when it's there in the water. And so you can see up above, we have a sampling design, a very sophisticated, very thorough sampling design where water's collected 1 day after, 1 week after, 1 month after treatment. And how long is it staying there? Its exposure time. Where is it dissipating to? This lends itself to some really high quality information when we can get the analytical results back that are highly reliable, they're regulated, excuse me. And then this matches up really well with, okay, so we treated in here, how far outside of here did it end up? And what plants were affected by this herbicide treatment? These are, we cannot get too far. We can see herbicide injury on plants, particularly target plants. We can't, without knowing the concentrations in the water, it's hard to know what to do next. For instance, if it worked really well, it would be nice to know what the concentration was and how long it lasted. So this is really valuable. It is an expense, but the information and not institutional knowledge gained relative to the cost of the herbicide treatment pays back in in dollars and cents in the form of savings in the future. So here's an example. This is Lake Thomas. I don't have any scale here, but this is an 80-acre lake. It's a small urban lake in Polk County. The color codes are indicating the concentration at 1 day after treatment, 8 days after treatment, 16 days, and 1 month. FPB means this is a herbicide called fluoroperoxyfen benzoyl. This is the active ingredient in the concentrate. And then it naturally degrades to the acid form, so FPA, but is still active. It's active to some, but less active than FPB. Don't want to get too much into it, but we need to know where FPA is relative to FPB. And what we see is FPB is detectable out to 16 days after treatment. That's interesting because usually in open water systems, large water bodies, we can't find it after 4 or 5 days. The reason why we can see it at 16 days after treatment, mind you, it's about 10% of the original treatment, but there's no real outflow. So the herbicide that goes in is confined within this small water body. And then, of course, is undetectable. So we can make suggestions or assumptions that the dissipation or reduction in concentration is related to the degradation. And so when we look at the acid, we can see low, because we're not adding acid, it converts to acid from the FPB. High, higher, and then still high. So you can see right here. So the FPB is degrading. It's an exponential decay function. So it offers a half-life. And then as FPB is declining, FPA is increasing because FPB is converting to FPA. And so this is just an interesting profile, more for Well, it definitely has management value. It suggests that this was a highly effective treatment. We had low migration or transport out of the water body. That can be an issue for herbicides, loss of activity related to that. In this case, we were able to keep the herbicide in the system and control a huge hydrilla problem. So anyways, it's just, but again, from an academic standpoint, it's really interesting to be able to plot this kind of information out. It helps us better in predicting future treatments. How long do we think the acid will stick around, or the benzyl form to stick around? Point intercept surveys. I better check my time. I'm kind of like just checking. Okay. Point intercept surveys. Go back on. This is probably the lowest tech type of information generated. It is probably also the most important information generated. It is the tried and true method. FWC dedicates a lot of resources to long-term monitoring and short-term monitoring for surveys on the water. It's actually also the most fun. You get to be on the water to do this. The reason why this is really important, point intercepts are, think of points, grid points, where you are taking a rake sample and you're using that rake to to classify at the species level, the plant species in the water. That includes native and non-native, and the abundance of those species. There are very few other technologies, including drones and et cetera, that can classify at the species level. So humans are still really important in planning and evaluating our aquatic systems, particularly for aquatic plant management. We don't have eyes on the water. We are very limited with our information to know what species are out there. So this is still really, really important. This happens annually and routinely, and it's institutionalized within FWC and other agency types. And so this is a standard that has carried on and has really, anyways, I've learned a lot from this. And so, and it's very involved. You have to have some expertise in taxonomy, and you have to be a good botanist. I'm not a good botanist, by the way. I appreciate people who are, and wish I, and with some jealousy. But it allows you to take this information at the species level, and you can see the record keeping and then the interpretations that can transpire from that. So really important. It's one thing to say, oh, there's lots of plants and now there's less plants. But we need to know, like, there's lots of hydrilla with small pockets of eelgrass. And then post-treatment, it's like, yeah, there's less vegetation than there was, but it's all eelgrass. So these are some of the successes that we're trying to derive at with selective management to control invasive plants, protecting and promoting native species. Here's an interesting example on Lake Panisofsky. Just pay attention to the colors, but what you're looking at is the orange is, and you got these different codes from 2016, 17, 18, and 19. This is part of the Fish and Wildlife Research Institute, which is part of FWC, and it's part of their long-term monitoring project. And so you can see a very dense grid pattern. So a lot of information being generated on the waters. Panisofsky, I believe, is 3,500 acres. Oh, over 4,000 acres. Sorry, over 4,000 acres, 660 points. That's a lot, man. It's an effort. Well, what you're seeing though is in 2016 there was hydrilla and pondweed, but the oranges suggest showing where pondweed is a dominant representative. It's exclusive to pondweed versus mixed in green, where it's like pondweed and hydrilla are both there, and hydrilla in blue is dominant. So clearly pondweed is a dominant SAD over hydrilla, which is somewhat of a rarity, but this is interesting. Then 2017, same thing. Then 2018, what happened? Pondweed is now equal to hydrilla. We see hydrilla starting to assume some dominance. And then 2019, what's going on here? They switched to hydrilla dominance. And it's true till today. And so I look back at the records, and I should have done a better job setting this up, but there's not a lot of herbicide treatments in this lake between 2016 and 2019. You want to know what happened is 2017, that's when a hurricane hit, and I forget the name of the hurricane. Water levels increased, dark water, a lot of organic matter, reduced light levels. Pondweed is extremely sensitive to low light. Hydrilla thrives and has a competitive advantage in low light. So this dark, deeper water, I think, I'm speculating to some degree, but it's very obvious that this affected the performance of pondweed and created an environment that gave hydrilla a competitive advantage. And so again, the dynamics of these aquatic systems that can just change, and then the challenge of reverting back or protecting and preserving these different environmental factors is really important. Hydroacoustic surveys. I've never used this before I moved to Florida, and I'm very fascinated by it, and I'm really impressed with the technology that this offers. This uses sonar in the water column. This allows us to estimate biovolume or mass of plant material in the water column. And so for a lot of our submerged aquatic vegetation, in particular hydrilla, it can occupy a water column and it becomes very difficult. And so being able to map these lake systems with sonar is extremely important. You can see how the difference between with SAV and without SAV. So allows us to calculate area for where treatments need to be administered, and then before and after also. So really important tool in the toolbox. And then of course it complements the point intercept, where you have estimated biomass with species presence. So it's like really heavy biovolume, and it's all hydrilla, as an example. And so here's some other examples of how hydroacoustics have informed us on certain treatments. You can see here we have a herbicide profile. This is the proximal edge of the treatment plot. So where the herbicide is treated, it does a fantastic job. And outside of the treatment plot, no effect whatsoever. Now we get down back up. Then we get to the other side of the treatment plot, where this is the direction of fetch. And you can see here's the edge of the treatment plot. And outside of the treatment plot, the herbicide migrated out. And then also you can see how it fades in. So understanding dissipation and migration patterns of the herbicide. And this is accomplished with acoustic mapping inside and outside of the treatment plot. And then we have harvesting, which is, cutter bars that can drop down to 5 feet in the water column. And you can see it's difficult. It's very hard to manage hydrilla with harvesting. It's much different profile than a herbicide treatment, which brings it down to the lake bottom. You can see here it's kind of choppy, a lot of miscuts, very difficult to maintain a straight line. You only have a 9-foot swath cutting bar. And plus, if you're in 7 feet of water and you can only cut down to 5 feet, you're leaving 2 foot of stubbles. And so that's a challenge in terms of the regrowth and the level of suppression you're offering. I'm not here to beat up on harvesting today, but I'm just saying that acoustics really inform us on the end result that we can achieve with some of our aquatic plant management activities. GPS tracking is an older technology. I continue to be impressed by what GPS has done for us, in spite of the fact that it's been around for 3 or 4 decades, it's been used in the field for a long time. It's now part of our life with our smartphones. We're talking about sub 2 meter accuracy. This is really impressive, and it continues to pay off in terms of our ability to know when and where something is occurring. And now GPS tracking, of course, fleet tracking is a well-established service that's available. And we are now starting to incorporate GPS tracking in some of our contract vendors with herbicide spraying and harvesting. And so the obvious thing is GPS tracking allows us to monitor where they're at and are they where they're supposed to be, kind of an enforcement scenario. That's not very interesting to me. I understand that's part of management of contract work, but really what's interesting is the records that are being recorded every 10 seconds is where they are and how long they're there. This allows us to now look at efficiencies of how much does it really cost to harvest a 1 acre plot? How much does it cost for a boat to go out and treat 10 acres? And so we have that because the time values in the GPS is actually more important than the geographic reference points that are offered. They're both really important, but if I know that there's 6,000 points that's equal to 60 hours in this area right here, that's very informative, because now when someone puts a bid in for work, you can be like, okay, so, but it's, and let's move to the next, oh, I thought I had it on there. Maybe I don't. I must have taken it out. Oh, no, it's right here. I'm like out of order. I'll back up. For example, herbicide treatments, airboats can cover an acre in 0.23 boat hours. So they can cover 4 acres per boat hour. A harvester, for instance, can cover an acre in 1.3 boat hours. So you do the math on that, it's about 4 to 1 in terms of effort. Now, and so if you know the hourly rate of an airboat and the hourly rate of a harvester, then you know that you need to manage 1,000 acres. Well, you can do the simple math when you're putting together a bid that there's an expectation that it's going to be at least this much time, which time is money. And so you can use GPS tracking records from previous efforts to understand the cost and the value of the operation being administered and what your expectations are for accomplishing the job. Let's move into satellite remote sensing. I'm going to keep talking fast because I probably gave too many slides. Oh, wait, let's go back up to here. Oh, there you go. For some reason, this is out of order. I think I must have like dragged it somewhere. We'll go back to that. I want to keep moving forward. This is the next slide, though. Satellite remote sensing. This is the funnest part for me. This is really, really engaging. This is where technology has come to a new level. And I say that because satellite remote sensing, it's a pretty sophisticated discipline. It's state of the art in technology. I mean, we're talking about putting things in sensors into space and taking pictures of Earth, and then sending those pictures back to Earth so that we can look at them. So this is probably another technology that's as old or older than GPS. It's been around a long time, but it's been very exclusive. It started with military applications, and it required a high degree of training and expertise to be able to access and utilize this information. Not anymore. This has become available to the masses. It has now reached the ground level. Satellites are available. Images of Florida are available every 5 days at 10-meter resolution. So if nothing else, I'd say pay attention to or visit the Earth Observer browser from Copernicus. It's part of the European Space Agency. They have a Sentinel-2 satellite constellation. These are satellites that are polar opposite. And so they take 10 days to get around the Earth. And because they're opposite of each other, it actually covers the Earth in 5 days. It has sensors that are multispectral instruments with optical cameras, including red, green, and blue, plus 10 more channels that go beyond that. Near infrared, shortwave infrared. This allows us to map water, vegetation, hardscapes, you name it. So there's a lot of applications here, in particular, the applications in aquatics that we're learning. We're conducting a workshop now in collaboration with the FWC to learn how to go on the website and access satellite data. By the way, free to the public. It's in the public domain, it is freely available. And it's at 10-meter resolution, high quality information that is readily or frequently updated. And so as an example, here's a 10-meter resolution image in true color for Lake Tahoe-Pegaliga. And you can zoom in and it captures all kinds of stuff. You can see hydrilla in the water column. You can see spatterdock and hyacinth and other emergent class vegetation in the littoral zones. Lots going on. And again, so you match that up with your familiarity in the field with what you're seeing remotely from this different perspective. And it is a rich picture because you know what's hydrilla, you know what's spatterdock, you are familiar with the landscape. And now you're getting a different perspective. And it really, I mean, it's hard to go in the field and see everything on 18,000 acres. This is an 18,000 acre lake, and I'm looking at it from a single point of view. So anyways, real game changer on how we can plan and evaluate. And you marry this in with our point intercept data, our field surveys, and our GPS archives, and all of a sudden things start to really click in terms of the information generated. As an example, this is a situation. This is the North Cove of Lake Parker in Polk County. This is about a 200 acre area. This raster, this heat map, is a mix of emergent and submersed vegetation. It's basically choking out the area, so it's destined for a herbicide treatment. This is 14 days prior to treatment. And so I'm able to map out and calculate that area of infestation. This is 46 days after treatment. You can see we selectively maintained the emergent vegetation and knocked out all of the hydrilla at 50 days after. I didn't have to go on the water to know this. This was available from my desktop. This is the perfect tool for a pandemic. You basically can manage all these areas across the entire state of Florida and across the world for that matter, and generate very quantifiable information. As an example, we can see that we started off with 60 hectares or 150 acres of hydrilla and dropped it down to less than 100 acres of vegetation. Sorry, it basically kept the emergent vegetation and eliminated hydrilla. So the difference from time before treatment and after treatment is the amount of hydrilla that was reduced, so we can actually quantify that. And then you can also create these really informative time-lapse GIFs that you can attach in emails, so you can inform your internal collaborators and the general public as part of your outreach program. This is an extremely valuable tool. Its limitations are that it's 10-meter resolution, which is medium resolution. It performs really well in areas that are 50 acres or greater. It becomes more limiting as the size of your operations shrink. So it's really ideal for broader, larger areas in the hundreds and thousands of acres. So let's talk about higher resolution products. You guys are definitely familiar with drones and airborne imagery. This again is a mature technology. It has come a long ways in terms of where we are from a regulatory standpoint, from a technology standpoint, and from an information generation standpoint. We're very familiar with DJI. It's going to become more difficult, obviously. I'm not intending to have this talk be about the regulatory side of things. But this little aircraft, which is about $1,100, it's a consumer grade aircraft with a 20 megapixel camera. It has red, green, and blue. So it's a 3-channel optical sensor, but we're mapping at 1 to 3 centimeter resolution compared to 10-meter resolution. We're talking about centimeter resolution, thousands of times greater resolution where you can pick up at the species level. And so we're really starting to adapt to this, where you can actually do you can create these green indices that map out vegetation before and after treatment. You can see the necrosis and browning out of the treatment area, and it picks up with the camera with some GIS remote sensing work. Very easy to accomplish. So as an example, this is a 150 acre hyacinth infestation on Lake Lake Kissimmee Lake. And you can see how it's pushing in on the spatter dock. It's expanding out. That's a classic kind of invasion front. And this is pre-treatment. And then with the GPS tracking, we can see where herbicide was administered. And we can calculate, based on knowledge of their concentration and flow rates, how much herbicide was placed where through GIS, and buffer it out so we know our treatment footprint. And even though it doesn't look red here, it was enough where it was picked up. And so The buffering is compensating for all of the herbicide within that area. And then we can see the results 30 days after treatment. We can see the effects of the herbicide treatment and all of the brown necrotic lesions created from the spot treatments. And then we can calculate against the treatment footprint, the symptom footprint based on the use of ortho mosaic or the imagery mosaic. So the symptomatic area was technically 25% of the entire herbicide footprint. And then we can see how it's now further separating out, and we can report a successful treatment where we protected the spatterdock and pushed back the hyacinth, a very quality professional job by the vendor. And we're able to quantify with greater detail versus like, yeah, I was out on the water, it looked great. We're used to doing that. I mean, what else could we do? We now can take it to the next level with the adoption of technologies related to aerial imagery, high resolution imagery and GIS, and with the use of GPS trackers, we can now really dial in on how well did it work and how long is that going to last for us, and was it worth the investment? And of course, the other important value is monitoring non-target selectivity. So as an example, this was an in-water treatment to control hydrilla. 7 days prior to treatment, we have Nufar, spatterdock, doing well. This is actually early spring. Then we can see 34 days after treatment, yikes, we're seeing, this is an auxin herbicide, so we're seeing chlorosis, twisting, epinasty, classic symptoms of herbicide injury. The grasses are doing fine. They're unaffected by the herbicide. We are concerned about the pads. What's going on? Let's go to 70 days. Okay. Looks like they're coming back. Okay, they were injured before. Now they're coming back. We were disciplined and keeping schedule. Okay, it said early on it's injured, but we got to keep monitoring what's going on. And then so with that in mind, this is what aerial imagery provides. So it looks like we're heading to the finish line here. And let's just establish where we're at today. What is the state of aquatic plant management or invasive plant management, natural area protection in Florida? Well, there are multiple levels of surveillance that can provide better planning and more comprehensive evaluation. Embrace the technologies that are available. They're freely available. They're low cost and in many cases free. Embrace these technologies in remote sensing and GIS. They will empower decision-making process with new knowledge. We are building institutional knowledge. We are constantly hiring new young biologists. They need to know where to go to, what happened in the past, and we are the purveyors of this information. And if we're not there, it needs to be available in some archival form. And we need to maintain a data-intensive treatment monitoring program that will improve transparency with the public and is a functional path to optimizing herbicide use in public waters and public lands. So my vision, our vision, is the future of APM and invasive plant management and natural area protection is in producing data-driven intelligence through adoption of information technology. We want to develop a workforce with proficiencies in GIS, remote sensing, and data science, and fuse that with the intimate familiarities in Florida's aquatic ecosystems and pest management strategies. We need to also invest in digital and geographic infrastructure able to receive and transmit timely, actionable information with ludicrous resolution and accuracy. Give us more, we're starving for it. And kind of going back to that second point, if all you know is how to sit in front of a computer and manipulate data, you are close to worthless. If all you do is go out in the water and tell us what you saw today, you're pretty close to worthless. So pardon, I mean, I don't mean to be rude, but if you are at least competent and proficient in both, you are so much farther ahead than one person who's skilled in this area or just one person who's skilled in this area. Empower yourself with being proficient in both areas, and it will greatly improve your ability to articulate the needs and accomplishments of your activities. So with that in mind, I really appreciate your time and attention. And if we have time for questions, I'm available. And thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Leary. I've heard this talk in a few different iterations, and I always enjoy it because they're so fascinating. The tools that are now available and the direction that aquatic plant management and invasive plant management in general is going with those technologies. So thank you so much. We are right about out of time. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to pop them in the chat box. And Dr. Leary can take a look as I give some quick updates on FISP and CISMA. So I'm going to throw my screen up. Here we go. And I'm also going to pop some links in the chat box related to these updates. So let me do that really quickly. And then we'll, all right, here we go. So really quickly, I just wanted to share, I talked about this last month. We were wrapping up the data on February's at-home weed wrangle, as well as some of the information from National Invasive Species Awareness Week and the activities that we did here in Florida. And so for our at-home weed wrangle, we had fewer participants than we did in our first year. But I think there was a lot going on and a lot of reasons for that. So we are definitely going to give it another go next year. But we did cover over 20 acres across 20 counties, and 37 invasive plant species were removed by primarily homeowners. So I think that's a great, continues to be a great outreach tool and action tool. And so that was the at-home weed wrangle. We had a number of volunteer weed wrangles during National Invasive Species Awareness Week hosted by CISMA partners. And in total, there were 152 volunteers across the state from 7 natural areas, and 14 invasive plant species were removed, and including just a lot of pounds of plant material. So shout out to everybody who participated and helped coordinate various different events. There were also educational opportunities that were really well attended also. I wanted to share a little bit of breaking news. Many of you have worked with or familiar with Cody Marie Miller with the Nature Conservancy. She has made the announcement that she's stepping down as chair of the Osceola CISMA, which she has shepherded for 7 years now. She's moving on to a new adventure with the Nature Conservancy that takes her out of Florida and even kind of away from invasive species work. And into new projects. So I just wanted to acknowledge all the work that Cody has done with partners in the Osceola CISMA and everything that they've accomplished together. She's been an incredible shepherd of this group, as well as just an incredible resource for the state of Florida throughout her career with everything she's done for natural resource management. So a huge thank you to Cody. And then just to share that the new Osceola CISMA co-chairs will be Krista Stomp with UFIFIS and Dana Sussman with the Florida Forest Service. So thanks to those two as well for stepping up to take on this role. We are going to miss Cody greatly here in Florida, but excited for her to start a new chapter. Upcoming events. So you will have seen this in the monthly CISMA Digest email that goes out. So if you don't receive those emails, you can join our listserv. But you can also visit the first link in that chat box is our statewide events calendar. So if you want more information on these events, there's some great stuff coming up. I want to highlight today the invasive fish roundup happening in Southwest Florida. This is a recurring event for Southwest Florida CISMA, and it looks like they've already got some great, a lot of registrations. It looks like it's going to be a great event. So excited to hear more about how that goes. Also, just a quick reminder, the North American Invasive Species Management Association, NASMA's annual conference is going to be in Florida in November this year, and they are partnering with the Florida Invasive Species Council. So that's going to be a great program, and hope to see some familiar faces there. A few announcements. The Florida Invasive Species Council currently has 2 grant calls for grant proposals out right now. The CISMA grant, the CISMA grant extended their deadline through the end of this week. So they had put that call out, I think, last month, and they extended the deadline. The research grant, there's also a call for the research grant. They can fund one this year, and those the deadline for those submissions is May 20th. And there's a link to the research grant info in the chat box. Also wanted to share that we received a call for submissions to the Aquatics magazine. They are preparing their summer issue, and so this is very pertinent to our topic today as well. If you have something you would like to share, you can submit it by June 5th. And then if you need any more of this information, feel free to reach out. Lastly, just our CISMA call schedule. We've got some great talks coming up. Next month, Dr. Lawrence will be with us to talk about Florida's plant list and plant listing. There's been some great developments in the past few years, getting more plants added to Florida's noxious weed list. And so, and then just some changes in the plant listing structures in the state. So really excited to hear from her. In June, non-native flatworms in Florida with Dr. Tim Collins. U.S. Army Corps partners are going to present in July and talk about kind of what their overarching role in invasive species in Florida is. More from the IFAS Center for Aquatic and Invasive Plants in August. And we'll hear again from Dr. Lawrence in September on her horizon scanning work. If you're not familiar with that, you're definitely going to want to tune in. As always, before long, we'll be starting to work on the 2023 call schedule. So if you hear a great presentation or if something comes up that you would like to learn more about, feel free to reach out to me. We can try to get something scheduled. And if you have work you'd like to present, we would love to have you. These CISMA calls are recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel. We're here the fourth Wednesday of each month at 1:30. And that last link there, the monthly CISMA calls link, will get you to that YouTube channel as well. And so this will go up sometime today or tomorrow. With that, thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. And we look forward to seeing you in whatever next month is. I think it's May. Have a great rest of your week. And thanks again to Dr. Leary for that fantastic presentation.
Thanks, everybody. Take care and have a great rest of the week.